Hello, I'm Mike, and this is Will. We are the Tabletop Donkeys.
Hello.
And we're bringing you issue 32 of Warhammer Age of Sigmar Mortal Realms magazine today. And with this issue, we got a set of Citadel Skulls. As usual, there's a time code if you just want to skip to the battle report for this issue. There's the chapters in the time bar as well. So we'll head into the issue now, have a quick look before the game. First up, we have some background on the Astral Templars Stormhost. All of these soldiers were fairly savage and brutal in their former lives, and they carry that tradition over in their Stormcast forms. Apparently they also have a large number of the Vanguard chambers, and they're famous for their hunter's instincts. And you can see some of the heraldry there on a Concussor and a Liberator, sort of burgundy and gold colour. Next up, we have some more background on the Nighthaunt. This talks about Lady Olinda leading the Nighthaunt to Nagash and then heading out to reclaim Shyish in his name. There was some background on the Chaos God Slaanesh, the Dark Prince, the god of excess. Talks about how he was imprisoned for a while by the gods of the elves, but has recently broken free. And his rivalry with Khorne, who he considers to be a bit too brutish. It's much more fun to toy with people before you murder them. And now onto our painting guide, where we're going to be painting all of the pre-sculpted bases on our models, and there's quite a lot to do. So we have things like the Celestial Blister, the easy-to-build Secretors and Castigators, the easy-to-build Glaive Wraiths, Thorns of the Briar Queen. There's quite a lot to go over, but since you basically finished the whole base, I'm not just going to go over it a little bit. Oh, there's also the Dreadblade Harrods and the Evocators as well. But you can see they make the model look much more complete, almost pretty much entirely complete. It does help these models look a lot more finished. And in the next issue as well, they go over basing the other models and using the Citadel Skulls we've got this issue. So we don't actually get to see any of the skulls in use. I did use some on the objectives that will be in this game, but you'll see that coming up. So I'll hand over to Will and he can go over some of the rules we're going to learn.
So before we get onto the battle proper, we have an overview of attacking, and once again this is a formal description of some of the core rules. In this case for attacking both with missile and melee weapons. And it's all stuff we kind of know, we've seen over the courses of our games, but this is just formalising it. It does clarify that if you have multiple weapons in a unit, for example the Sequitors or the Grimghast Reapers that we've seen with the magazine, then you are supposed to use all of one type of weapon before moving on to a different type. And likewise, the sequence for making attacks, hit rolls, wound rolls, save rolls, and then determine the damage. Once an entire unit has finished attacking, then you allocate all of the wounds. But a new thing that is mentioned here is cover. You add +1 to save rolls for a unit if all of its models are wholly on or within a terrain feature when the rolls are made, unless the unit that is rolling the saves made a charge move earlier in that turn. And it also never applies to units with the monster or war machine heroes with 8 or more wounds. And also obstacles, which are a specific type of terrain, and it says it'll be clearly described on their war scroll, and if they are obstacles, we don't actually have any terrain war scrolls, so I'll talk about that more in a moment. If a terrain feature is an obstacle, then against missile weapons specifically, if all of a unit's models are within 1 inch of the obstacle, and the obstacle itself is closer to the unit that is shooting, then they gain the benefit of cover to their saving throws. Then there is an attacking tutorial focused on cover and just how this works. So there's a couple of examples here in this case. The Liberators on top of the building are in cover. The Chain Rasp on top of the building can attack them because it's within weapon range. The ones on the bottom cannot. And they are also not in cover because the unit is not wholly on or within the terrain feature. And an example here of how an obstacle works, and as I said, we don't have any actual war scrolls for our terrain yet, but this implies that the ruins that we do have count as obstacles because there's a unit of Liberators benefiting from the obstacle rules against some shooting. But the Sequitor in front of the building does not, because he's closer to the Briar Queen than the ruin is. And it also mentions that for the Nighthaunt specifically, they don't actually gain the benefit of cover because they have the Ethereal rule, which as we've seen means they ignore rend, but they'd also ignore positive modifiers to their save rolls, including the benefit from cover. And finally, a tutorial on attacking with different weapons. So here is the example that I gave actually of the Sequitors and the Grimghast Reapers having different weapons to attack with. And then how to allocate wounds and remove models, and it does mention here that the Death Knell specifically needs to have its wounds allocated after all other wounds have been allocated. Then we have our background for the battle, the soulpods, as this little bit of fiction is called. This describes a meeting between Xandria Azurebolt and Old Gnarlroot, who is a Tree Lord Ancient, one of the Sylvaneth. Xandria and her warriors have met the Tree Lord and his attendants and sworn an oath to defend the Sylvaneth soulpods. And so our battle plan is called Securing the Soulpods. Now the forces we have, the Nighthaunt led by Knight of Shrouds, and there's 9 Glaive Wraith Stalkers and 10 Chain Rasps, facing off against Xandria Azurebolt, 5 Sequitors and 3 Castigators. The battle map is kind of interesting. Our territories remain the same as they were in the previous issue, 6 inches from either board edge, but there are 3 objectives placed along the diagonal line going across the board, as you can see. So there's one in the direct centre, and then 2 10 inches away from the centre of the central objective along that line. These objectives obviously represent the soul pods that need to be secured, and this of course uses the objectives we got with the previous issue, but once again we've made our own objectives just to make them a bit more visually interesting, so you'll see those in a second. The Nighthaunt player starts setting up first, and they also get the first turn. The battle continues until the end of the 4th battle round, so quite a short game, and the player who controls the most objectives wins, and objectives are controlled by having the most models within 3 inches of the centre of the objective. All very straightforward. We'll get straight into the game now. So here's our battlefield, and we've set up our models, but first of all let's have a look at the placement of the objectives so that we can see them on the battle mat. So we have one right in the centre, and then one 10 inches away diagonally towards the corner, which places it just inside this ruin over here on the Stormcast end of the board. And another diagonally opposite, 10 inches away towards the Nighthaunt end, which puts it over there near the well. Having a look at the Nighthaunt deployment, we've got the chain rasps on the left, the Nighter Shrouds at the back, and then the Glaive Wraith Stalkers on the right as you look at it. And on the Stormcast end, the Castigators are deployed on top of the building. There's just about enough room for them to fit on there in their deployment zone. Xandria Azurebolt in the middle, and then the Sequitors next to her. The Nighthaunt get the first turn in the first battle round, so we're on to battle round 1, Nighthaunt turn 1.
So we're just going to move up a little bit, to stay out of Xandria's spell range, so she has to move at least a little bit to get in range. And we can move slightly faster than the Stormcast, so I don't think we're in as much of a rush to get to the middle of the battlefield.
But there's nothing else to do in Nighthaunt turn 1, so on to Stormcast turn 1. So I gain command point, and I think Xandria, her damage spells are out of range, so we will try and cast Mystic Shield, just because the Knight of Shrouds is quite quick, so potentially he could charge next turn. We're looking for a 6. Nope, failing with a 4, but I don't mind. My movement phase, the Castigators have moved to the edge of the building, where they're all just about in range of a Glaive Wraith Stalker. Xandria has moved out front, she's now within 18 of all the Nighthaunt units, in case she gets to cast her spell next turn, and the Sequitors are just formed up behind her. And as I said, the Castigators are all just about in range of a Glaive Wraith Stalker. 3 shots hitting on 3s, rerolling 1s, because as usual I will always be doing power to accuracy with their Thunderhead Great Bows, and the prime is on the red dice because he hits on a 2. They all hit, and we've got a double 6, so that's 2d3 hits plus 1 for the prime. Only 3, so only 4 hits total. Wounding on 3s. We've only got 1.
4 plus save for the Glaive Wraiths. Made it. Also, I suppose it might be worth pointing out that
well, that is the end of the turn and the end of the battle round. So we're on to battle round 2, and rolling off for whoever gets to first turn. I rolled 5.
So have I. So it's a tie, so I get to choose. So I'm going to choose to go first.
Okay.
Yeah, we're just going to move back out of range of that spell.
Okay.
Lack of a better plan.
Okay, but that's the end of the Nighthaunt turn. On to the Stormcast. Gain command point. We'll try and cast Mystic Shield again, because my plan to zap the Nighthaunt has been foiled. Right, we've got it off with an 8 this time. I'll put that on Xandria herself. And then movement's pretty simple. The Castigators will stay where they are. They might be able to get 1 model in range if they come off the building, but I'd rather have them up here safely holding the objective and probably not going to be able to be shifted off it, for the sake of 1 shot anyway. And then Xandria has moved forward to get all the Nighthaunt in range of her spell again, and the Liberators have reorganised slightly to put the Great Maces near Xandria, hopefully to deter the Knight of Shrouds from trying to attack her next turn. But that's all of my movement, and again the end of the battle round, because I'm no shooting and nothing else to do. So on to battle round 3. We're already halfway through the game. Rolling. I've rolled a 2.
I rolled a 3, so I think I'll go first this battle round again. My movement phase, the Glaive Wraiths are going to run. Getting a 3. I'm probably not going to be able to spend that many command points, so I'm just going to spend a command point to make that 6. Yeah, so they're going to finish their run to that point. So the Chainmaster's going to move up to consolidate on that objective. And the Knight of Shrouds is going to move up on top of that building. So he certainly looks impressive, but he actually keeps both units within 6 inches of his automatically passed bravery test, which might come in handy.
But no charges, and the Glaive Wraiths ran, so that's the end of the turn again. Onto the Stormcaster. Gain command point, and we'll go for a Spirit Storm, which is every enemy unit within 18 takes a mortal wound if it goes off, and they're also -1 to run and charge rolls. But it needs a 7. That is an 11, which is... So the Knight Shrouds is down to 5, and the other 2 units have lost a model. And then in the movement phase, the Castigators will stay where they are once again, and Xandria and the Sequitors have moved across the board this way. We're going to try and have a go at these Glaive Wraith Stalkers, because they feel like the biggest threat to my plans at the moment, because they could probably take an objective off me. And I reckon if I can get rid of them, then there's a decent chance probably I can get back to the middle objective in the last turn. So we'll do that, and then we're on to the shooting phase. And we're going to shoot at the Knight of Shrouds because he's out of lookout sir range, standing on top of that building, and it'd be nice to try and knock some wounds off him. So 3 shots on 2s or 3s if you're rolling 1s. We've got 3 hits but no 6s. 3s to wound. Oh, just 1.
4+ save. Made it.
Yeah. And once again, he doesn't get benefit of cover even though he's standing on the terrain because he is a Nighthaunt, he's ethereal. Onto the charge phase. We'll start with Xandria, I think, charging these Glaive Wraiths. Actually, no, I've changed my mind. We'll start with the Secretors because, yeah, I don't want Xandria to get too far away and be out of range for the reroll. 5, that isn't enough. I will re-roll that because I've got command points to spend and I really need more than a 5 to get all of the Secretors in range to strike. An 8, that should do the trick. So they'll wrap around like this and then Xandria will charge. She rolled a 12, which is more than enough. And it's obviously more than enough to bring her into contact with these Glaive Wraiths down here. At the start of the fight phase, the Secretors will declare their etheric channeling power to weapons.
Yeah, and I'm going to use Lord of Geist on the Glaive Wraiths in case any of them still live.
How to give them an extra attack? Yeah, that's the command ability unique to the Knight of Shrouds. And then we'll pick these Secretors to fight the Glaive Wraiths first. The Secretor on the far right has piled in, and then we'll attack with the Great Mazes first. 4 attacks hitting on 3s re-rolling, 6s do D3 hits. Well, we need that re-roll. 3 misses. Okay, a miss, but we've got 2 6s, so that's a good trade-off. The 6s turn into 5 hits more, so that's 6 hits in total. Wounding on 3s, 5.
4+ saves. Ooh, failed 4. That's going to wipe them out.
That's 8, yeah, there's only 8 left, and they're 2 damage each. So that's the Glaive Wraith wiped out, and then I can still pick Xandria to pile in because you make a charge move this turn, so she'll use that. And she moves 3 inches back towards the objective, getting closer to the Knight of Shrouds, who is the closest enemy model, so that is a pile-in move. And it's also the end of my turn and the end of the battle round. So on to battle round 4, and we need to roll off. I've got 4.
I've got 4. I get to choose then.
Yeah.
I'm going to choose to go first.
Okay.
The Knight of Shrouds is going to move off the building, going to try and kill off all those castigators. And the Chainmaster is just going to move, try and get as much distance between the rest of the Stormcast as possible. And in the charge phase, the Knight of Shrouds is going to charge, because possibly with positioning, if he can get here, he might be within 3 inches of that objective. Going to need probably something like an 8 to get the horizontal distance, not bothered about the vertical distance. Need an 8 because I've got -1 to charge rolls from Xandria's spell. Oh, a 9, that's going to be enough to get him up there at least.
There we go, so it is indeed enough to get him up there. He's facing backwards just because no part of your base is allowed to move further than the distance. So.
And it looks cooler from that angle as well.
Yeah, and yes, the back of his base is within 3 inches of the top of the base of the objective. It's a little bit technical, but that is enough to hold the objective.
And at the start of the fight phase, Knight of Shrouds is going to use Lord of Geist on himself.
Gives
so he gets an extra attack with his sword and the hooves of his horse. So he got 5 attacks with his Sword of Stolen Hours, hitting on 3s. 4 hits, wounding on 3s. 2 wounds, and needs to do better than that. +1 for having cover from being on top of the building, but -1 rend.
So 4+. Oh, made both anyway.
Yeah.
But you've got the horse still.
Yeah, 3 attacks from the horse, hitting on 4s, 2 hits, wounding on 5s, 1 wound.
3+ save against this because it has no rend. Oh, I failed. The horse did a wound.
Typical that the horse would do all the damage.
So a castigator takes a wound, and then they get to fight back. Although I think the Prime might not be in range, I'll just measure. The Prime is in range, so we've got 6 attacks hitting on 4s. We get 4 hits, and they wound on 4s as well. We've got 2 wounds. No benefit to save because he's ethereal.
4+ saves, made 1, failed 1.
It's down to 4 wounds. So that's the end of the combat. No battle shock tests necessary, so we're on to the Stormcast turn 4, the last turn of the game. We'll do Arcane Bolt in the hero phase, just because it's easier to cast. Oh, 12, yeah, D3 mortal wounds, of course. 3 wounds. I'll put that on the Knight of Shrouds, so he's down to 3. I'm not actually going to be able to kill him, but
1.
So the Knight of Shrouds is down to 1 wound. The castigators are going to jump off the building. Even though he's only on 1 wound, they could probably shoot him to death, but the danger is it would backfire and he'd kill them in the combat phase and take the objective.
No point taking unnecessary risks.
Nope. And Secretors and Xandria move on to the objective in the middle of the board, which means I end up holding 2 objectives because these castigators outnumber the Knight of Shrouds. I'm not going to do any charges or fighting, so it's a Stormcast victory, 2 objectives held to 1. Feels like not much happened in this game, but that's the result of it. So anyway, we will pack up and give you our thoughts on that now. So that was the Battle for issue 32 of Age of Sigmar Mortal Realms magazine. How do you think that went?
Worse than the last one. I only did 1 wound this entire game, so I'm not really sure what I would have done differently. Maybe it would have been better to try and move the Glaive Race out first and try and kill the Castigators, but I think if I moved out, I'd just get whittled down by all your spells, so considering that there's 3 objectives in this game, I need to leave 1 behind. Or I suppose I could have just ignored the Castigators and tried to fight over the middle. Just try and flood the board at the end of turn 4, whatever.
Well, I think that's a good point, because the placement of the objectives and the victory conditions and the fact that it was only 4 battle rounds long really did sort of dictate how this game worked. And to be honest, it was a bit weird.
It's still, the game's so short that it stopped you from casting spells for 2 turns, and there's half the game that Xandria's not doing anything, and your Castigators are out of range as well. So there is incentive to just ignore the objective on your side of the field for me. And we only have 3 units for 3 objectives each, so as soon as you destroy one of mine, it's kind of like, oh well, I just can't really...
But it also means the Nighthaunt have to basically hold a unit back in reserve, whereas the Castigators obviously are shooting units, so it doesn't matter that they're at the back.
And they have the range to be able to at least affect the final objective, probably, from where you had them. They're basically the ideal unit for sitting on objectives, whereas I kind of have to use all of mine aggressively. So maybe it is better for the Nighthaunt just ignore their objective and try and stop you getting yours. I don't know. And then I suppose at the end of the game you could use the Night Shroud's speed if he's still alive to get back to your home one.
And as you proved, you do have the speed to threaten all 3 of the objectives on the board, whereas I sort of don't. But as we saw, if I concentrate my force on one thing, I can just destroy it. So I suppose looking at the forces on paper, you would say, well, the Stormcast probably got the better deal here. I mean, the Knight of Shrouds can do a lot of damage, but he
tends not to.
He has to roll well. And the Glaive Race, again, can do a lot of damage, but they have to be able to roll some dice to do that, and they didn't get a chance. But the scenario probably gave the Nighthaunt more of a chance than maybe in a straight-up fight, but it's still just
probably going to end up being a straight-up fight in the middle anyway. Well, the main problem I have with that is this, how do you deal with Secretors without them just... If I charge you just do power to shields and then have a 4+ rerollable save. If you charge your power to weapons and you have a 3+ rerollable to hit, and just annihilate wherever you charge. So it's...
Yes, exactly. And because of the way selecting units works in the fight phase, they get to hit back immediately afterwards, before anything else. I suppose the answer to how to get rid of them is just drown them in attacks, but even when they still get to hit back in the middle.
Well, I suppose really the ideal way to get rid of them is spells and ranged attacks, neither of which I had. Or mortal wounds as well, actually. I suppose is the other way.
Yeah, like the Briar Queen is actually fairly effective against them because she has spells and her high ranged attack.
I guess you'd have to do, maybe if I got to go second, I'd charge everything in at the Secretors, and then hopefully enough of my stuff survives, and I get to go first in the next battle round.
Yeah, that's also a good point, is that you got to choose who go first every battle round in this game as well, so if I'd managed to sneak one of those, then I suppose possibly with objective games there is value in going second in a battle round because you get to see what your opponent does, and if you can stay far away from something and then counter-attack it because they have to move on to it, then that can be useful. It is interesting that we're sort of seeing some different tactics to what we've been having to use so far, but still not much more than a bit of a scrum in the middle. Hopefully it will improve. Oh, and well, we get the rules for cover in this issue. It gives the Stormcast a bonus if they're standing on top of the terrain, which sort of makes up for the fact that it gets in the Stormcast way and not the Nighthaunt. Yeah, but obviously it doesn't affect the Nighthaunt. I think the fact they ignore Rend is much better than... it doesn't matter that you don't get cover, because ignoring Rend is a lot better than...
and most of the time it's going to be better.
Yeah. It does mean the terrain is a little bit more meaningful.
Yeah, you might choose to stand behind it.
Yes, exactly.
Like the little bit of wall actually does something except get in the way.
Oh, and we also got the Citadel Skulls with this issue, which is kind of an interesting choice of what to give you with a magazine, I suppose.
It's nice to have some basing material other than just a texture paint. The only really things to really talk about them now is that I think they're about £15 normally, so you're getting them for about half price. To be honest, I probably wouldn't buy Citadel Skulls if they didn't come with a magazine, so potentially worth getting a copy of this issue just to get a set of them for cheap. And I think one of the sprues is explicitly just Warhammer 40,000 stuff. There's a lot of Tau and Tyranid heads, so you don't want to use those for... Well, I mean, there's no reason you couldn't use them for Age of Sigmar, but they're not technically races that exist in this universe.
But yeah, and we'll talk a little bit more about the use of them in the next issue, where it actually tells you to use them on the basis of some of the models that don't come with the pre-moulded bases like we saw painted earlier in this issue. So we'll discuss a little bit more about the use and what they suggest to do with them then. Anyway, I think that's everything for this issue, so if you enjoyed this video, then feel free to leave a like and subscribe. Let us know if you have any tactics, particularly for the Nighthaunt, just anything that can try and make up for the fact that the scenarios seem to mostly be stacked against them. But we've been the Tabletop Donkeys, and we'll see you in the next one.
Bye for now.